There's a Tibetan practice so powerful that masters who learn it approach death with the same joy most people feel about going on vacation. While the rest of humanity lives in terror of mortality, these practitioners have discovered a meditation technique that completely eliminates death anxiety by transforming your relationship with impermanence itself. You will learn the exact 9-point death meditation that Tibetan monks use to befriend mortality, why contemplating impermanence paradoxically makes life more vivid and meaningful, and the specific visualization that prepares your mind to recognize death's clear light as your own essential nature. But here's what amazed me most. This practice doesn't just remove death fear, it eliminates anxiety about everything else too. When you're no longer afraid to lose everything, you become truly free to experience everything. This ancient wisdom doesn't prepare you for death, it prepares you for fearless living. What if I told you that your fear of death isn't protecting you from anything, it's actually preventing you from living fully? The Tibetan masters discovered something revolutionary. Death anxiety isn't a natural survival instinct. It's a learned response that keeps you trapped in a prison of your own making. For over 1,000 years, Tibetan practitioners have used a specific meditation technique that doesn't just reduce death fear, it completely transforms your relationship with mortality, impermanence, and loss. This isn't positive thinking or denial. It's a systematic method for recognizing death as your greatest teacher and most trusted friend. The practice I'm about to share comes from the deepest levels of Tibetan Buddhism, traditionally taught only to advanced practitioners who had already spent years preparing their minds. But I believe this wisdom is too important to keep hidden. In our death-phobic culture, where people spend their entire lives running from the one certainty we all face, this practice offers something unprecedented: complete freedom from the fear that underlies all other fears. Tonight, you'll learn not just how to stop fearing death, but how to use death awareness as the key to unlocking fearless, authentic living. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Tibetan masters consider death contemplation the most practical spiritual practice you can do. But first, let me tell you about the moment I realized that everything I thought I knew about death was completely wrong. 3 years ago, I was sitting with a meditation teacher when he casually mentioned that he was looking forward to dying. Not in a morbid or suicidal way, but with the same anticipation you might have for a long-awaited vacation. When I asked him how this was possible, he smiled and said, "Because I've been practicing dying every day for 40 years. Death holds no mystery for me anymore. The illusion of permanence is the root of all death anxiety. From childhood, we're conditioned to believe that things should last forever: our relationships, our health, our lives. We build our entire identity around the fantasy of permanence. So when death threatens to take it all away, we experience existential terror. But here's what the Tibetan masters understood. This terror isn't about death itself, it's about the collapse of an illusion. We're not actually afraid of dying. We're afraid of losing our false sense of security in a world where nothing is permanent. The attachment to identity creates the second layer of death fear. We become so identified with our thoughts, emotions, memories, and physical sensations that we believe we are these temporary experiences. When death threatens to dissolve this constructed identity, the ego interprets it as complete annihilation. The masters discovered that this identification is itself an illusion. You are not your thoughts, you are the awareness that observes thoughts. You are not your emotions, you are the consciousness in which emotions appear and disappear. When you recognize your true nature as pure awareness, death becomes simply the dissolution of temporary appearances, not the destruction of who you really are. The unknown as enemy is how most people relate to death. Because we can't control or predict the dying process, we imagine it as a terrifying journey into hostile territory. This fear of the unknown keeps us trapped in familiar but limiting patterns, afraid to take risks or embrace change. Tibetan practitioners flip this relationship completely. Through systematic death meditation, they become intimately familiar with the dying process, the dissolution stages, and the consciousness states that follow death. The unknown becomes known, the enemy becomes a friend, and terror transforms into curiosity. Cultural death denial amplifies natural death anxiety into pathological terror. Our society treats death as a medical failure, a taboo subject, and an enemy to be fought at all costs. We're never taught how to die well, how to prepare for the transition, or how to find meaning in mortality. This cultural programming creates what psychologists call death anxiety, a pervasive fear that influences every aspect of our lives. We make decisions based on avoiding loss rather than embracing possibility. We cling to security rather than pursuing growth. We live defensively rather than courageously. The paradox of death avoidance is that trying to avoid death actually prevents us from living fully. When you're constantly running from mortality, you can't be present for life. When you're terrified of losing everything, you can't fully enjoy anything. When you're defending against death, you're defending against life itself. The Tibetan practice I'm about to share breaks this cycle completely. Instead of avoiding death, you learn to contemplate it systematically. Instead of fearing impermanence, you discover it as the source of life's preciousness. Instead of seeing death as the enemy, you recognize it as your most profound teacher. This isn't a morbid obsession, it's the most practical wisdom you can develop. When you're no longer afraid of death, you're no longer afraid of anything. When you accept impermanence, you become free to love without attachment, create without clinging, and live without the constant anxiety that underlies most human suffering. The heart of Tibetan death practice is a systematic meditation that completely transforms your relationship with mortality. This isn't visualization or positive thinking, it's a logical contemplation that leads to unshakable certainty about the nature of death and impermanence. Death is certain for everyone. Seems obvious, but most people live as if they're the exception. The meditation begins by contemplating the absolute certainty of death. Every person who has ever lived has died or will die. No amount of wealth, power, or medical intervention can prevent this ultimate reality. Spend time really absorbing this truth. Look at historical figures, celebrities, spiritual masters all gone. Your parents will die, your children will die, you will die. This isn't pessimistic, it's liberating. When you fully accept death's certainty, you stop wasting energy on the impossible task of avoiding it. The time of death is uncertain is where the practice becomes transformative. You could die today, tomorrow, or in 50 years. You have no guarantee of another breath, another heartbeat, another moment. This uncertainty isn't meant to create anxiety, it's meant to create urgency about what truly matters. When you deeply contemplate the uncertainty of death's timing, priorities become crystal clear. Petty concerns dissolve, grudges seem ridiculous. Every moment becomes precious because you recognize it might be your last. Nothing can help you at death except spiritual practice reveals the futility of most human pursuits. Your money, possessions, relationships, and achievements cannot accompany you through death. Only the consciousness you've developed, the wisdom you've cultivated, and the love you've embodied continue beyond physical dissolution. This point isn't meant to make you renounce the world, but to put worldly concerns in proper perspective. Enjoy life fully, but don't mistake temporary pleasures for ultimate security. Human life is extremely precious, emerges from contemplating how rare conscious existence is. Among all possible forms of life, human consciousness has unique capacities for wisdom, compassion, and spiritual development. This life is an extraordinary opportunity that shouldn't be wasted on trivial pursuits. Life is fragile and constantly threatened involves contemplating all the ways death can occur. Disease, accidents, violence, natural disasters. The human body is incredibly vulnerable, sustained by delicate processes that can fail at any moment. This fragility isn't depressing. It's a reminder to cherish each healthy moment. The body will definitely be destroyed means contemplating the physical dissolution that death brings. This beautiful, strong body that you identify with will decay and return to elements. Meditating on this reality helps you identify less with physical form and more with the consciousness that animates it. Loved ones cannot accompany you is perhaps the most emotionally challenging point. Everyone you love will be left behind when you die, and you'll be left behind when they die. This separation is inevitable and absolute. Contemplating this reality deepens your appreciation for relationships while reducing unhealthy attachment. Wealth and possessions are meaningless at death involves imagining your death and recognizing that nothing you own can help you. The house, car, bank account, and treasured possessions that seem so important become completely irrelevant. This contemplation naturally reduces materialism and increases focus on inner development. Your own body cannot help you is the final recognition that even your physical form, the thing you most identify with, becomes useless at death. You cannot take your strength, beauty, or health with you. Only consciousness continues. So consciousness development becomes the only rational priority. The integration practice involves regularly cycling through these 9 points until they become lived wisdom rather than intellectual concepts. When you truly absorb these truths, death fear dissolves naturally because you understand exactly what death is and isn't. The deepest secret of Tibetan death practice is that contemplating impermanence doesn't make life depressing. It makes life infinitely more beautiful, meaningful, and vivid. When you truly understand that everything is temporary, you begin to experience existence with the intensity of someone who knows they're witnessing a miracle. The preciousness paradox reveals that things become precious precisely because they don't last forever. A sunset is beautiful because it fades. A flower is cherished because it wilts. A moment with a loved one is treasured because you know it won't repeat exactly the same way ever again. When you apply this understanding to your entire life, everything becomes sacred. Your morning coffee, your child's laughter, your partner's touch, your own breath all become infinitely precious because you recognize their temporary nature. Attachment versus appreciation is the crucial distinction that impermanence meditation teaches. Attachment tries to make permanent what is naturally temporary, creating suffering when change inevitably occurs. Appreciation fully enjoys temporary experiences without demanding they last forever. This shift transforms your entire relationship with life. Instead of clinging desperately to good experiences, you savor them completely. Instead of resisting difficult experiences, you accept them as temporary visitors. Instead of living in constant anxiety about loss, you live in constant gratitude for what's present. The motivation for growth emerges naturally from impermanence awareness. When you realize that this life is temporary and precious, you become motivated to use it wisely. Spiritual development becomes urgent because you understand that consciousness is the only thing you can actually develop and carry forward. Present moment intensity increases dramatically when you truly accept impermanence. Knowing that this moment will never come again makes you fully present for it. Knowing that this conversation might be your last with someone makes you listen more deeply. Knowing that this day is unrepeatable makes you live it more consciously. The end of procrastination happens naturally when you integrate impermanence awareness. You stop postponing important conversations, meaningful experiences, and spiritual practice because you recognize that someday might never come. The uncertainty of death creates urgency about what truly matters. Compassion amplification occurs because impermanence meditation reveals that everyone is in the same situation. Temporary beings having a brief experience of consciousness before dissolving back into mystery. This shared vulnerability creates natural compassion for all beings struggling with the same fundamental challenges. Fear dissolution beyond death is perhaps the most remarkable effect. When you become comfortable with the ultimate impermanence death itself, all smaller impermanences become manageable. Job loss, relationship changes, health challenges, and other life transitions become opportunities for growth rather than sources of terror. The courage to love fully emerges when you're no longer afraid of loss. Knowing that all relationships are temporary paradoxically allows you to love more deeply. You stop holding back emotionally because you're afraid of eventual pain. You give your heart completely because you understand that love itself is what makes temporary existence meaningful. Creative urgency develops when you realize that your time for creative expression is limited. Artists, writers, musicians, and creators of all kinds often report that death awareness intensifies their creative drive. Knowing that your unique perspective will someday be gone motivates you to express it fully while you can. The gratitude revolution happens when impermanence shifts from enemy to teacher. Instead of resenting the temporary nature of good experiences, you become grateful for the privilege of experiencing them at all. Instead of taking life for granted, you recognize existence itself as an extraordinary gift. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, but with consistent practice, impermanence meditation creates a fundamental shift in how you relate to all of life's experiences. Death becomes not the enemy of life, but the teacher that makes life infinitely more precious and meaningful. The most advanced aspect of Tibetan death practice involves preparing your consciousness to recognize what appears at the moment of death, the clear light of awareness itself. This isn't just preparation for dying. It's training in recognizing your deepest nature while you're fully alive. Understanding clear light begins with recognizing that consciousness has a fundamental, luminous quality. This isn't metaphorical in deep meditation. Advanced practitioners directly perceive awareness as brilliant, spacious, and luminous. This same luminous awareness appears with ultimate intensity at the moment of death. The clear light isn't something external that you encounter. It's the revelation of your own essential nature when all mental activity ceases. It's like clouds clearing to reveal the sun that was always shining behind them. The sun doesn't appear, it's simply no longer obscured. The preparation practice involves learning to recognize this luminous quality of awareness during meditation. Begin by sitting quietly and observing the space-like quality of consciousness, the aware openness in which all thoughts, emotions, and sensations appear and disappear. Notice that this awareness itself is naturally luminous, clear, and spacious. It's not thinking about anything, but it's fully awake and present. This is the same awareness that will appear with brilliant intensity at death. So familiarizing yourself with it now prepares you for that ultimate recognition. The dissolution simulation is an advanced practice where you mentally rehearse the death process. Imagine your body becoming heavy and dissolving into earth. Feel your fluids merging with water. Sense your warmth dissolving into fire. Experience your breath merging with air. Finally, let all sense of physical existence dissolve into space. As you practice this dissolution, maintain awareness throughout the process. Don't let consciousness become unconscious. Keep recognizing the luminous awareness that observes all these changes without being affected by them. The recognition training involves learning to identify with awareness itself rather than with the contents of awareness. Most people identify with their thoughts, emotions, and sensations. But you are not these temporary appearances, you are the luminous consciousness in which they appear. Practice shifting your identity from I am thinking to I am the awareness that observes thinking, from I am feeling sad to I am the consciousness in which sadness appears. This identity shift prepares you to recognize yourself as the clear light when it appears at death. The merger practice is the ultimate goal, learning to rest in luminous awareness without any sense of separation. Instead of observing the clear light as something external, you recognize it as your own essential nature and merge with it completely. This merger isn't something you do, it's something you allow. When you stop identifying with temporary mental contents and rest in awareness itself, the merger happens naturally. You don't become the clear light. You recognize that you always were the clear light, temporarily appearing to be something else. The daily integration involves bringing this recognition into ordinary activities. Throughout the day, periodically recognize the luminous awareness that's reading these words, listening to sounds, experiencing sensations. This awareness is always present, always luminous, always free, and it's your deepest nature. The fearlessness result emerges naturally from this practice. When you recognize yourself as luminous awareness, rather than as a temporary collection of thoughts and sensations, death becomes simply the dissolution of temporary appearances, not the destruction of who you really are. The clear light that appears at death isn't something foreign or frightening, it's the revelation of your own essential nature. When you've spent years recognizing this luminous awareness in meditation and daily life, encountering it at death becomes like coming home rather than facing the unknown. The liberation possibility that this practice offers is profound. According to Tibetan teachings, if you can recognize the clear light at death as your own essential nature and merge with it completely, you achieve liberation from the cycle of birth and death. But even if you don't achieve complete liberation, the recognition creates a peaceful, conscious death experience rather than one filled with fear and confusion. This isn't just preparation for some distant future, it's a practice that transforms your relationship with consciousness right now. When you recognize your essential nature as luminous awareness, every moment becomes an opportunity to rest in your deepest truth. The most remarkable aspect of Tibetan death practice isn't how it prepares you for dying, it's how it transforms every aspect of living. When you're no longer afraid of death, you become free to live with a courage, authenticity, and joy that most people never experience. The end of existential anxiety happens when death fear dissolves. Most human anxiety stems from the unconscious terror of mortality. When you make peace with death through systematic contemplation, this underlying anxiety disappears, taking with it most of the stress and worry that plague ordinary life. You stop making decisions based on fear of loss and start making them based on authentic values. You stop avoiding challenges because they might lead to failure and start embracing them as opportunities for growth. You stop living defensively and start living creatively. Relationship transformation occurs when you're no longer afraid of loss. Knowing that all relationships are temporary paradoxically allows you to love more deeply. You stop holding back emotionally to protect yourself from future pain. You express love fully because you understand that love itself is what makes temporary existence meaningful. You also stop trying to control others or make them permanent fixtures in your life. You love them as they are, for as long as they're present, without demanding guarantees about the future. This creates much healthier, more authentic relationships. Priority clarification happens naturally when you integrate death awareness. Trivial concerns that once seemed important reveal themselves as meaningless distractions. Petty conflicts, status competitions, and material accumulation lose their grip on your attention. Instead, you focus on what actually matters: developing consciousness, expressing love, creating beauty, serving others, and experiencing the miracle of existence while you have the chance. Your life becomes aligned with your deepest values rather than with social expectations or ego desires. Creative liberation emerges when you're no longer afraid of failure or judgment. Knowing that your time for creative expression is limited motivates you to share your unique gifts without worrying about criticism or rejection. You create from authenticity rather than from the need for approval. The courage to change develops when you realize that clinging to familiar but unsatisfying situations is actually more dangerous than embracing uncertainty. Death awareness shows you that security is always temporary anyway, so you might as well pursue what's meaningful rather than what's merely safe. Present moment mastery becomes natural when you truly understand impermanence. Knowing that this moment will never come again makes you fully present for it. You stop living in regret about the past or anxiety about the future and start experiencing the richness of now. Gratitude revolution happens when you recognize existence itself as an extraordinary gift. Instead of taking life for granted, you become amazed by the simple fact that you're conscious, that you can experience beauty, that you can love and be loved. This gratitude transforms ordinary moments into profound experiences. Service motivation emerges when you realize that everyone is facing the same fundamental challenge: learning to live meaningfully in the face of mortality. This shared vulnerability creates natural compassion and motivates you to help others navigate their own journey with more wisdom and less fear. Spiritual urgency develops when you understand that consciousness development is the only work that truly matters. You stop postponing spiritual practice and start treating it as the most practical thing you can do. Every moment becomes an opportunity for awakening because you recognize how precious and temporary this opportunity for growth is. The paradox of fearless living is that when you're no longer afraid of death, you're no longer afraid of anything. Job loss, relationship changes, health challenges, and other life transitions become opportunities for growth rather than sources of terror. You develop what Tibetans call confident fearlessness, not the absence of challenges, but the confidence to meet any challenge with awareness and courage. Integration practices for bringing death awareness into daily life include starting each day by remembering that this might be your last, ending each day by reflecting on what you're grateful for, regularly contemplating the temporary nature of your possessions, relationships, and achievements, using difficult experiences as reminders of impermanence rather than as problems to solve, practicing letting go of small things as preparation for the ultimate letting go. The goal isn't to become obsessed with death, but to use death awareness as a teacher that shows you how to live fully. When you're no longer running from mortality, you're free to embrace life completely. Transforming your relationship with death requires consistent practice, not just intellectual understanding. Here's how to integrate Tibetan death contemplation into your daily routine in a way that gradually dissolves fear and increases life appreciation. Morning death awareness begins each day by spending 5 minutes contemplating the uncertainty of death's timing. As you wake up, instead of immediately checking your phone or rushing into activities, pause and recognize, I have no guarantee that I'll be alive tonight. This day is a gift with no promised duration. This isn't meant to create anxiety, but to create appreciation and urgency about using the day wisely. When you truly absorb the uncertainty of death's timing, every moment becomes precious and every choice becomes significant. The 9-point cycle should be practiced weekly, spending focused time contemplating each point until it becomes lived wisdom rather than intellectual concept. Choose 1 point per day and spend 10 to 15 minutes really absorbing its implications for your life. Impermanence spotting throughout the day involves regularly noticing the temporary nature of experiences. When you're enjoying something beautiful, remind yourself, this is temporary, which makes it precious. When you're experiencing something difficult, remind yourself, this is temporary, which makes it bearable. Clear light recognition can be practiced during meditation by learning to identify with awareness itself rather than with mental contents. Spend time each day simply resting in the luminous, spacious quality of consciousness without trying to think about anything or achieve any particular state. Evening reflection involves ending each day by contemplating what you're grateful for and what you would regret if this were your last day. This practice naturally aligns your daily choices with your deepest values and reduces the accumulation of regrets. Weekly death meditation should involve a longer session where you systematically contemplate your own death, imagining the dissolution process, considering what you would regret not having done, and practicing letting go of attachments that keep you trapped in fear-based living. The integration key is consistency rather than intensity. Better to spend 5 minutes daily contemplating death than to have one intense session per month. The goal is to gradually shift your baseline relationship with mortality from fear to acceptance to appreciation. Signs of progress include decreased anxiety about loss, increased appreciation for present experiences, greater courage in making authentic choices, reduced attachment to outcomes, increased compassion for others facing mortality, and a growing sense of life as adventure rather than threat. The practice works by gradually familiarizing your mind with death until it becomes as natural and non-threatening as sleep. When you've contemplated death systematically for months or years, it loses its power to terrorize you and becomes instead your most trusted teacher in the art of living fully. The Tibetan practice that removes fear of death forever isn't about becoming comfortable with dying. It's about becoming free to live. When you systematically contemplate mortality through the 9-point meditation, embrace impermanence as your teacher and train to recognize the clear light of your own awareness. Something extraordinary happens. You stop being afraid of anything. This isn't denial or spiritual bypassing. It's the most practical wisdom you can develop. When you're no longer running from the one certainty we all face, you become free to embrace life completely. When you're no longer afraid of losing everything, you become free to love everything fully. When you accept the temporary nature of all experiences, every moment becomes infinitely precious. The masters who approach death with joy haven't become morbid or detached from life. They've become more alive than most people ever dream of being. They've discovered that death awareness is the key to fearless living, authentic relationships, and unshakable peace. You can begin this transformation today. Start with just 5 minutes of morning death awareness. Choose one of the 9 points and contemplate it deeply. Practice recognizing the luminous awareness that's listening to these words right now. Use impermanence as a teacher rather than an enemy. If this ancient wisdom has opened your eyes to new possibilities for fearless living, there's so much more to explore. Click the video appearing on your screen right now to discover the secret Tibetan technique for conscious dying, where I reveal the advanced practices that masters use to maintain awareness throughout the entire death process. And tell me in the comments, what would you do differently if you truly accepted that death could come at any time? Your insights help build a community of people committed to living fully in the face of mortality. The ultimate question isn't whether you'll die, you will. The question is whether you'll spend your remaining time running from that reality in fear, or embracing it as the teacher that shows you how to live with courage, love, and unshakable appreciation for the extraordinary gift of conscious existence. The practice begins now. The fear ends when you're ready to let it go.